Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
Our first guest today is a journalist and an author. He's written some terrifically thought-provoking books, including Banker Occupation, of course, Flashpoint in Ukraine. He's writing about Ukraine today on his terrific blog. He also is the host of the Progressive Radio News Hour at the Progressive Radio Network. That is a programme I highly recommend. Let's welcome live from Chicago our friend and colleague Stephen Lendman. Stephen, welcome back. How are you?
Oh, Richie, thank you so much. It's great to be on with you again. I'm doing fine.
You're a gent. You sound great, Stephen. There's so much we can get into in the 25 minutes that we have. Just as you come on the line to me now, you'll probably even be aware that the US Senate has confirmed Rex Tillerson, the former Exxon chief, of course, as Donald Trump's Secretary of State. We're going to talk a little bit about the protests in the UK against him and the United States. What have you made of what's been going on in the time period since he was inaugurated last month? He's been in office now, I think, around about 2 weeks. What's going on?
Well, things have been very contentious here, as you well know, Richie, beginning back in June of 2015, when Trump first announced his candidacy for president, came down the escalator of his Trump Tower, I guess made an announcement in the lobby area, wherever exactly it was, and the media and it seems like all humanity has been on his back since, and he really did the most unlikely among I think it was 17 Republican candidates. He was a long shot at best, and yet he emerged triumphant over all of them. And it looked for certain, and I believe for certain, that Hillary would be triumphant in November. And Trump surprised everybody by winning the election. I believe he won 30 states to Hillary's 20. Hillary was very strong in America's east and west coast. And if you look at a map color-coded between the two of them, you would see in the middle it was a blizzard for Trump, and on the coasts it was a blizzard for Hillary. But he won, and it's very hard to know how the popular vote came out because there's so much hijinks in America. It's already been discovered that 800,000 people, either dead or undocumented, voted for Hillary. So those votes should have been wiped out instead of in her side of the ledger. But the point is that Trump won. The bashing of him continued post the election, and after he was inaugurated, with so much done in the interim between election on November 8th and his inauguration on January 20th to derail him, recount votes in 3 states, all other kinds of hijinks, of pressure on the electors from the Electoral College, despite what they usually do throughout America's history. I think only once or twice did an elector vote for a candidate who wasn't the winner in the election. In this election, there were 2 who voted, either 1 or 2 who voted against Trump, and I believe it was 6 who abandoned Hillary and refused to vote for her. But it's been very contentious against him right up to this very moment, and I don't expect it to stop, Richie. They're going at him hammer and tong, including the media, which he has every right to be very, very angry about, completely one-sided against him. I put it this way: no matter what he does or he doesn't do, they're against him.
Now this is fascinating because on the face of it, when you leave the emotion to one side and when you leave your own opinions, and I've put my opinions to one side, I don't believe in democracy. I believe we always get, there are two sides of the same coin. Each time you make a choice, it's the establishment choice. So I don't vote, I don't take part in it, but I'm obviously very keenly interested in it. And I leave that to one side and I look at it and I see the corporate media demonisation of him, and you are 100% right. There's no disputing that. That's absolutely right. But yet everything he's done, everything he said, even today, putting Iran on notice, kowtowing to Israel, talking about embassies in Jerusalem, not criticising illegal settlements, putting so many Zionists around him in his cabinet. I'm staggered at the media are going after him in this way, because, as I said, on the face of it, he seems to be exactly what you'd expect of a US president, right?
Well, I agree on that, and I'm very, very upset about a lot of the things he's done. He's done a few things that I like, but it's too early even to judge him on those. He killed the TPP agreement. In an article I wrote today, I quoted his key trade advisor, Peter Navarro, saying TTIP, the TPP counterpart, the transatlantic trade deal. He said it's dead, quote unquote. I believe it is dead. Of course, somebody else in the future can bring it back, but I think for now that it's dead, and that's wonderful to have these things happen.
Yes.
Because these bills are extremely anti-consumer, just a corporate giveaway, a sweetheart deal for corporations, anti-environment, anti-consumer, anti-freedom. So that's a good thing. He said he considers NATO obsolete, but he's reversed himself on that, telling Theresa May when she came to Washington that he supports NATO 100%. Those were her words, not his, but she said that's what he told him. So I'll go along with what she said. So he's reversed himself on that. The bill the executive order he put out restricting entry into America from people from 7 countries, which just happen to be Muslim countries. Most of them America is at war with, or has been at war with. Terrible conditions there, and the people that we've done so much harm to, he refuses to let into America for 120 days. Well, the 120 days could turn out to be 1,020 days. He can simply renew the order for another 120 days ad infinitum, Richie. So this could go on forever. And the country that he's harmed, that's been harmed the most in the last few years, Syria, they're banned indefinitely, which, as far as Trump is concerned, is forever likely throughout his administration. We're not talking about people who are terrorists, Richie. We're talking about human beings in need. Let's treat them that way. But he's not doing that, and that's outrageous.
It is absolutely outrageous. Stephen Lendman is our guest, folks. His blog can be found at sjlendman.blogspot.com, sjlendman.blogspot.com. We're going to tweet that out there as well. Stephen's radio show, the Progressive Radio News Hour on the Progressive Radio Network, is brilliant. It's a must listen. You are as sharp a writer as there is on the politics of the Middle East. This, I'm going to tear up the Iran deal. This rebuke of Iran today by Michael Flynn, these strong words, appeasing Israel. Is this another way of going after Russia and China? Because on the one hand, Trump, appears to be sincere in his willingness to have a good and open dialogue with President Vladimir Putin. But on the other hand, this is a backdoor way of antagonizing Russia. It could be argued. What do you think, Stephen?
It's a backdoor way of antagonizing China. If he's hostile to China and looks for improved relations with Russia, I'm concerned that there could be something going on. Trump is mainly concerned with trade. He talks his 2 main priorities in office. Number 1, to protect the country. I guess that's the main priority of any president. And the other thing is to improve the economy and create a lot of jobs. He's justifiably angry about all the jobs that will lift America for other countries, to low-wage countries. So he's particularly angry at China because China has got the majority of America's manufacturing base that used to be based in Detroit and Pittsburgh and Cleveland and other U.S. cities, and now it's in China and it's in other countries. So he's angry about that. But to start a trade war with China over this is terrible. If he angers China, he's got to realize that China and Russia are very close allies, and the more you go after one, the closer their alliance becomes. If you antagonize China and cause it all kinds of grief, including militarily, if he sends the fleet into the South China Sea belligerently, and Rex Tillerson, now the Secretary of State, said America simply won't tolerate China declaring sovereignty over the islands, which is its own territory. A terrible comment to make during his confirmation hearings. If Trump has policies like this, he'll antagonize Russia, and they'll never be good relations between America and Russia. And I believe the same thing, to a lesser extent, goes for Iran. I believe these countries are good allies, Russia and China especially, but Russia is an ally of Iran. China is an ally of Iran. Iran threatens nobody. And to support the Zionists in Israel by being hostile to Iran, he'll end up being hostile to China and Russia at the same time. A terrible policy if he pursues this.
Stephen Lendman is on the line, folks. Stephen, David Icke, who's written very favourably about you in his books in the past, David is a fan of your writing. David put a scenario to me the other day. Now, David has written about Trump, and I think he's been very right. He said there's no doubt that Trump, I'm paraphrasing what David said now, but he said, it was a primal scream from the disenfranchised, from the downtrodden, from people who are fed up of the establishment and corruption. There's no doubt, and we have to accept that, whether we like Trump or not, that people were fed up of the Bushes and the Clintons, and they saw Donald as, some sort of anti-hero, or whatever way you want to call him, and he was going to stand up to it. Now, David put a scenario to me the other day, and he said, look, I'm not saying this will happen at all, but imagine it as a scenario. Imagine Trump was placed where he is by the very same people who place every president and every major leader in the Western world. Imagine they put him there because they knew he would be beloved by the disenfranchised. They knew he would be seen as a hero, as a sort of a Kennedy-type figure, ironically, even though he's nothing like Kennedy. They would see him as their Kennedy. Imagine then the same cabal, Stephen, decided to murder Trump. These are the people that we, at least I believe anyway, and David believes, want a civil war, because out of a civil war, they'll be able to bring the order to bear that they've always wanted, the new world order. Do you think that's a far-fetched scenario, or is it something that we should be looking out for? Trump might be taken out by the very same people in order to bring about the sort of chaos that they want. Massive civil war, massive division. What do you think?
When you're saying a civil war, do you mean blood in the streets in America?
Pretty much. And I put this question to Paul Craig Roberts, and I'll tell you what, you tell me what you think, and I'll tell you what Paul says.
I don't see blood in the streets between Trump supporters and people who are very angry against him. And, there's really extreme hostility that's being fostered by the U.S. media. Really trying to get the public enraged about him. Again, no matter what he does or he doesn't do. He's very easy to pick on because he's sticking out his jaw with very contentious policies. So it's very easy to go at him and be very critical. And I think there's a campaign. There's a campaign going on to delegitimize him, yes, to undermine his agenda, to get the public against him. My fear is not having a civil war with blood in the streets, but the possibility that he could be impeached, a real possibility, and the other possibility is he could be assassinated. I think those are real possibilities, not so much blood in the streets, Americans fighting each other, shooting it out. The gunfight at the OK Corral on a nationwide basis. I don't see that happening.
No, and that's and you're right, and I've put that wrong, and I maybe I've misrepresented the scenario that David was putting out. Not necessarily a complete, civil war in the very sense of civil wars that we've seen in countries before. Not every single man and woman, but aspects of people, different types of people. Because as you said, the demonization, you've written brilliantly about this. I'm not just saying that. Stephen's blog, by the way, folks, where he's written extensively about Trump and what's been going on, sjlendman.blogspot.com. You see, every time the media does what it does, it endears his supporters to him even more, Stephen. And what I think David was suggesting, and of course David wasn't suggesting this, he was saying this was one line in a long line of possibilities, was that he could be assassinated. And what that would do then is it would cause chaos, and you would have there's no doubt you'd have riots, you'd have protests, they would turn violent in various cities, I have no doubt, because these people love him the more attacked he is. And now I put the same thing to Paul Craig Roberts, and I think Paul leans towards you, but he said it's a definite possibility, he said.
A definite possibility for what?
That particular scenario, Trump being taken out, and then there being chaos, which might lead to a kind of a type of a martial law being imposed. And again, yeah, go ahead, Stephen.
If Trump was taken out, if he was impeached or assassinated, I think that really might arouse an uprising. It would have to be done very delicately. I don't know how you do this stuff. I mean, do something and convince people that what you're doing is something they should support, like a 9/11 attack, which was state-sponsored terrorism, but the country was convinced to believe that crazed Arabs were responsible. There was a campaign against Nixon that got him to resign. There were powers who wanted him out of office, and it looked like there was a real possibility that he would be impeached and removed from office. There have only been 2 U.S. presidents impeached, besides Nixon resigning, impeached, but not removed from office. There's a difference between impeachment and removal. One of the houses does the impeaching, and the other house does the removal. Not both of them the same thing. And if there would have to be a campaign to convince a lot of Trump supporters that what he's doing really isn't what they wanted to do. If he lets people down, Richie, he's won over a lot of people, saying he's going to put Americans back to work and give them back a lot of the things that they've lost over the last generation under the Clintons and the Bushes and Obama. And he's promised he's going to change things around and be a president for all Americans. If he doesn't do that, if his policies show that he really is no different than his predecessors, then he could lose support from his rank and file. But if he does some things like killing TPP and whatever that the establishment does not want, and they decide they want to go at him the way they went at Nixon, forcing him to resign to avoid being impeached, then Trump could be removed from office by either getting him to resign or by impeachment. And if that didn't, I mean, he's very strong-willed. If that didn't work, then they could take him out. They could assassinate him, which I would say is a real possibility. But they would have to maneuver. You can't just. I mean, I think America's deep state, Richie, is divided. It's divided between those that support Hillary and those that support Trump. And the ones who supported Trump got him into office as president. But the ones who support Hillary are still around and going at him. And I'm sure their campaign is to demonize him and win over a lot of Trump supporters to their point of view, and continue a campaign to delegitimize him and undermine him and get him out of office, unless they can somehow bend him to change what he might want to do to come around and do what they want to do. If that was the case, then he could get along very well. They still might criticize him a little bit, and they'd cut him a little bit of slack to do a few things, but I'm certain they're very, very upset about killing TPP and killing TTIP. And if he pulls back a little bit on imperial wars, they'll be enraged about that. And of course, they're furious about any possibility of rapprochement with Russia. That probably is number one on their list, because rapprochement in Russia would mean less possibility for the wars they make so much money on. So all these things are turning around, and it's only less than 2 weeks into his administration. On Friday, it'll be at the 2-week mark. Well, Thursday, he'll complete 14 days in office. So it's so early, it's very hard to judge him. He's done an awful lot in a very short period of time, but it's easy to forget that in Obama's early days in office, he came out with a bunch of executive orders, and combined with executive memoranda, the two of them combined, EOs and memoranda, he issued more than any U.S. president since Harry Truman. I didn't know that. Discovered that in an article I put out today. So we'll have to see what Trump does. I mean, he's got a blizzard of stuff coming out now. I'm sure he's going to slow down. He's got a lot of things on his mind. He wants to get it out in memoranda, in executive orders, and then he'll slow down to the business of governing, and we'll have to see what he does. I'm mainly concerned. I think it's a lost cause with the bankers, Richie.
Yes.
With Goldman Sachs people, he's put in power in Washington, and Paul Craig Roberts sees this very much. It looks like he's turning the economic side of the economy, the economic side of America, over to Goldman Sachs. Excuse me.
Do you know what, Stephen?
Get that frog out of my throat.
Yeah. I think you're on the. I think you're on the money. I think you're on the money. No pun intended. With what you just said there, and this is why, we've been saying he's filled the swamp as opposed to draining it, or he has drained it, but he's turned the hose on the White House. Now, we've got you for another 6 or 7 minutes. Folks, go to sjlendman.blogspot.com, bookmark Stephen's blog, his website. I want to talk to you briefly before we run out of time about fake news. Now, an inquiry was launched in Westminster yesterday, headed up by a Conservative Member of Parliament called Damien Collins. And they're going to look into the phenomenon of fake news. And they have said, at least Collins has said, that this is one of the biggest threats to our democracy today, websites making up stories and putting out fake news. Now, I gave a very strong comment on this earlier on. I'm not going to repeat it, other than to say I find it absolutely terrifying that they're using the example of some silly websites that we call clickbait, and they're using those as an example of why they have to go after the independent media. Now, I know you've seen this coming because you've written about this and talked about this before. How do you feel about this fake news agenda? What's coming down the line, Stephen?
Oh, that's very, very scary, Richie. What bothers me is, of course, they're going after alternative media. They don't talk about the fake news that the BBC puts out, or CNN, or New York Times, or none of that. I mean, that's real fake news, but they consider that legitimate. They're going after alternative media. Maybe they'll go after people like me. And the danger is that at some point down the road, they literally could shut us down. They could put us out of business. They could literally find a way to call legitimate dissent a crime, so that articles that I would put out, or others like me, or other alternative media, criticizing the government, they could call us criminals, either shut us down, order us to stop, and if we don't, arrest us and put us in prison for doing our jobs. That's the scary thing that I see coming. We've got it here in America. You've got it in Britain, in Ireland. You've got it in Europe, other parts in Europe. And it's a very, very scary thing. It's a freedom-destroying activity that's going on. And if a way isn't found to counter this, we could end up losing all our rights. We've lost so many of them up to now, Richie. We could end up losing them all. And America was never a democracy. That's a topic for another program. But we could literally lose all our freedoms. And America is really a tyrannical state right now, a police state. But if all of this stuff comes to pass, we could have full-blown tyranny. And if people rally in the streets against this stuff, we could have martial law, the Constitution suspended, and that's it. I mean, that's the end of everything, where all freedoms are gone, and would be no different than Nazi Germany and the other tyrannical regimes.
You know what? BBC interviewed a former Facebook executive on their breakfast program a couple of mornings ago on television, and the woman's name was Elizabeth Linder, and her suggestion was so ludicrous, I was convinced the BBC presenter would jump all over her and shoot it down, but of course they didn't. She said, what we need to happen is we need basically Facebook users to be the police. We need them to report when they see fake news. We will then send the fake news article to fact checkers, and those fact checkers will determine whether the story is allowed to be shared around on Facebook. Now, at no point did the BBC presenter make any inquiry about fact checkers. At no point did the BBC presenter say, isn't it a very scary road to go down to encourage people to use a social media site, to basically use the site to be snooping around on people and reporting people? I mean, this is like, you'll remember the communist witch hunt, Stephen. It's ludicrous. Who would fact check these stories, and who would police those people? It's just lunacy, whichever way you look at it, right?
Yeah, it really is, Richie. I mean, it's the rogue elements policing themselves. You know, the wolf guarding the hen house. I mean, it really is outrageous stuff. It's going on here. Facebook is doing it. Anything they see on their site that they consider unacceptable by whatever standards they have, they'll pull it off. They can do anything that they want. And, of course, they're in cahoots with the government in Washington. And I don't think I've heard a Trump position on this, but I imagine he would go along with stuff like this. I believe he's a pretty hard line, so I think he would go along with this. There'll probably be more police-state laws out of Congress, more police-state laws in Europe, and the end game with all of this is continuation of the imperial wars, Richie, and all of us losing our freedoms, all of our freedoms. So really, there's nothing. Really, is nothing left for any of us. Either you knuckle under to the system, or you're in big trouble, and they can come and get you in the middle of the night, lock you up, and your friends and your family have no idea whatever happened to you. You just disappear.
You just disappear in the middle of the night like a banana republic. Folks, you've got to listen to the Progressive Radio News Hour on the Progressive Radio Network. Go to sjlendman.blogspot.uk, .co.uk or sjlendman.blogspot.com. Stephen is a prolific writer. His articles are sourced and packed full of references. You don't see this, unfortunately, too much these days. He's old school. I can't recommend him highly enough. Stephen, thanks again for coming on and giving us your thoughts. We'll wait a few weeks and a couple of months, and we'll have a chat again, and we'll see how Trump is doing in a couple of months' time. Thank you, my friend.
Oh, thank you, Richie. It's great being on with you.
Gentleman, Stephen Lendman on the line to us there from his home in Chicago, and he's a prolific writer, so no doubt Stephen is going back to work